Afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this very exciting webinar on the launch of this landmark report by Professor Roslyn Russell and RMIT on Australia's financial wellbeing and the need for an integrated approach. My name is Caroline Stewart, and I'm the CEO of Ecstra Foundation, who has funded the research. Before we start, I'd like to advise participants that this webinar is being recorded. I would also like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands which we all meet on today, which are right across Australia. For me, I am on the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, a beautiful part of the world where the land, seas and water all meet. We acknowledge the deep connection of First Nations people with the land and acknowledge that it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. So the webinar today follows up on a very successful and warm welcome that we had for launching the report in Melbourne 2 weeks ago. Ecstra commissioned this work after realising that it is indeed 6 years since a comprehensive review of the state of financial wellbeing in Australia has been undertaken. And who better to undertake that than an acknowledged and much respected author, researcher and academic, Professor Roslyn Russell. Roslyn joins us today to explain the key themes from the report, some of which might surprise you, and some of them are long-standing issues that really are worth revisiting. From Extra's perspective, there's lots of stakeholders who are really familiar with our work here today, but we also appreciate that there are a whole range of people working in the area of financial capability and financial wellbeing, and particularly frontline community organisations, financial counselling, community legal services, as well as other academics and government and school and researchers. So we've got a really, really diverse community joining us today, which is really exciting. Extra is a grant-making foundation for those of you that have not come across our work. We host the Financial Wellbeing Network, and we focus on 3 areas. We aim to connect people with the resources that they need to live their best financial lives. We seek to help educate and equip people with the skills that they need in order to make informed financial decisions. And thirdly, we have an influencing agenda, which is looking at the policy and advocacy settings in Australia and what needs to change in order for a more integrated approach to be taken in order to really move the dial on financial wellbeing in Australia. And that's where Professor Russell and her latest research report comes in. So Roslyn is an acknowledged expert in the area of financial capability and financial wellbeing, and her work spans more than 25 years. I'm not supposed to say that, but Ros, you are really a well-established expert. And her work over those years has influenced the outcomes for government, for financial services, and for the community sector. Ros today will share the key themes from her report, and we'll talk about some of the big issues there. I think what is not unfamiliar to many people that have already read the report or have read the executive summary is that Australia is doing well in various areas. However, what we lack is an integrated approach, bringing all the different players together to aim at the same outcomes, to measure what we're doing well, and to talk about and to put into action activities that will move us along and have a more integrated approach to financial wellbeing. It's a pretty straightforward format. Ros is going to do all the heavy lifting by presenting the key findings from her report. It's a 45-minute session, so at the end we are hoping to have time for a few Q&A. You're very welcome to put some comments or questions in the chat channel. We'll try to get to a few of them. The webinar recording will be available at the end of the webinar, and also it's available on the website, the executive summary, and also we invite you to join the Financial Wellbeing Network to learn more. So without further ado, Roslyn, I'll hand over to you to present the key findings from this very exciting report. And before I do that, I will acknowledge also that this is done in conjunction with RMIT, with Professor Mike Reid and the team there, as well as with Ros's consultancy, Financial Wellbeing Research. Thanks, Ros.
Thank you. Now we're just going to share my screen here. Great. Thank you very much. It's great to be with you today. Good afternoon, and it's wonderful to not. Well, can't see anybody, so it's great that that you're with us this afternoon. To begin, I want to also acknowledge that I'm presenting from the land of the Wurundjeri people from the Kulin Nation, and pay my respects to elders past and present, and to the First Nations guests attending today. So I can't tell you how happy I am to be at this point in the process. It's really great to be talking about the report rather than doing it, and to be able to see the final version of the report and to launch it a couple of weeks ago was a really big relief, but it was also a very joyous time as well. I did enjoy doing this work. It's been absolutely wonderful to see all the research that has ballooned over the last 5 or 6 years, and to bring it all together to provide something that I hope will be of interest to many sectors. So on behalf of my co-authors, I want to thank Ecstra Foundation, not only for supporting the project and funding it, but also for providing such great practical support whenever we needed it. We had a great reference group as well who provided expertise and guidance, and also a valuable sounding board. We are especially grateful to the interviewees, and if anyone's had a chance to look through the report, they will see a lot of spotlight sections, which I'm sure you'll agree provide some reprieve from all the academic literature that surrounds it. But the interviewees really brought the concepts to life and really showed what was happening on the ground, and the expertise just has really made the report far more interesting and also relevant. So 25 years, roughly how long Australia has been doing excellent, often world-leading financial literacy and capability research and practice. Our research, our policies, our programs were all held up internationally as examples of how to do this well. So I want to be honest with you today about where we are, and I want to make one clear argument that the way we strengthen financial wellbeing has to change. The title of our report is really its whole thesis. It's an integrated approach. So let me explain what we mean and why it should matter to everyone attending today. Oops, there we go. For most of those 25 years, the instinct in policy and practice has been to fix the individual. If we just knew a bit more, budgeted better, understood compound interest, and downloaded the right app, we would be fine. Financial wellbeing has predominantly been treated as a personal responsibility, but the evidence no longer supports that. So when researchers ask what actually drives a person's financial wellbeing, individual traits such as like being disciplined, not being impulsive do matter, but they're not the main story. The greatest influences are structural: adequate income, secure and dignified work, good health, and strong regulation. So financial wellbeing is not a technical problem to be fixed. It is a lived experience of security, of freedom, and of being able to make choices that allow us to enjoy life. And it changes across the life course, which means that our responses need to change too. One of our interviewees, Dr. Carmen Daniels from ICANN, asked the question when I interviewed her, and it really sits at the heart of our field. Whose financial literacy are we trying to promote? Whose standard, whose context, and whose life? Because once you ask that question, you start to see how stuck our systems are. Carmen pointed out that the way we fund this work hasn't changed in 400 years since the Elizabethan Poor Law. It's designed to pull people out of crisis. But as Carmen put it, the expectation is that we bring people to thriving. So that's the gap, really, in a sentence. We've designed systems to manage hardship and then asked it to deliver flourishing. And if we keep asking only what's wrong with the individual, we'll keep missing the systems that make the most difference. And there's another shift that the evidence now demands and points to, and it may be the most important of all. For a long time, we've talked about financial wellbeing as though it sat out to the side of our life in its own box. The research no longer lets us do that either. So our finances and general well-being are not two separate things that happen to meet at the edges. They are inextricably linked. A major European study published last year across 7 countries, hundreds of in-depth interviews, randomized controlled trials, analysis of bank data and surveys set out to understand what financial well-being actually really means to people. What they found is that it can't be separated from general well-being at all. They define financial well-being through security, freedom, and the simple enjoyment of life. In fact, other research finds that how we're doing financially shapes our overall well-being as powerfully as, now listen to this, the combined effect of job satisfaction, physical health, and our relationships. So when I talk about financial well-being today, I'm talking about well-being, full stop. That's the lens I'd ask you to carry into everything that follows, because the forces that shape our financial lives are, in the end, shaping our well-being. We don't have to imagine what that looks like. Our interviewees gave many insights into how this manifests in practice. And that was the benefit of having the interviewees talk to us from their practice and from what they observe and see with clients all the time. Arise Foundation works with women rebuilding their lives after family violence. Their recovery program doesn't start with budgeting or a job application. As Caroline Khalil, our interviewee, told us, it starts with well-being, with mental health and self-worth, because without that, the financial recovery simply doesn't hold. I asked Caroline what financial well-being would look like for her clients, and she said that for these women, financial well-being means independence, free choice, and control. ICANN's Wellbeing Wheel is an example of how these working in community, excuse me, see the reality long before, no, excuse me, I'll just, they see it long before, oh, just a second, I might just, where's my mute button? Sorry, I've been talking too much already this morning. So Carmen Daniels, in telling us how ICANN respond to the realization that money is inseparable from well-being, demonstrates the shift we need. They noticed that most of their clients were repeat clients. They would receive a no-interest loan, get help with debts, and then be back again really soon after. So the short-term fixes were not the solution. Their answer is Yarn and Money, a program that maps a person's whole life on a well-being wheel. Health, culture, connection, and finances all understood together. Because money problems are not treated in isolation, because in people's lives they never are. So our report started with the question, what are the big forces reshaping Australians' financial lives right now? And are our policies, regulation, and education keeping up? So we focused on 3: technology, health, and climate change. So let's take technology. It's brought real benefits, access, convenience, inclusion, but it has also rewired how we spend, and frankly, it's rewired how our brains work as well. And it's not really in our favour all the time. Chandni Gupta, who researches deceptive online dark patterns, described them to us with a phrase that stayed with me. They are designed to wear us down, and it's death by 1,000 cuts. Scams, AI-powered. Australians had more than $260 million stolen by scams last year. Now look at health. It's bidirectional. The link runs both ways. Money stress makes us unwell, and ill health drains our finances. Beyond Blue's Rebecca Gardner told us that almost 1 in 2 Australians now report distress from financial pressure, and that once people are juggling 5 or more stresses at once, the rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal thoughts rise exponentially. Take climate change. This is no longer just an environmental story. It's a household finance story. Julia Davis at the Financial Rights Legal Centre described insurance premiums in high-risk areas as reaching $30,000 a year. In her words, even a rich person wouldn't pay that. By 2030, the research shows that an estimated 1 in 11 Australian properties could be uninsurable. But here's the crucial point. These three forces don't act in isolation. When they intersect, they amplify existing vulnerabilities, and they hit hardest the people already finding it difficult to make ends meet. The forces can't be stopped through one lever. Only an integrated approach will have any chance of working. So here's the uncomfortable part. While the world has become much more complex, our financial well-being as a nation has gone backwards since 2020. And the national leadership that should be coordinating a response has been, frankly, in hiatus. So right now in Australia, responsibility for financial well-being is scattered. It's across Treasury, ASIC, ATO, social services and education. Each is doing good work, but largely in isolation. No single body holds the whole picture. Lessons go uncaptured, good practice goes unshared, and the programs run in parallel and never really quite join up. Fragmentation and duplication waste precious resources, and I think that part is the bit that makes me feel sick. And we're flying blind in places we shouldn't be. Rosette Kerr, a teacher and educator we interviewed now at Extra, voiced the concern that many have in the sector. We actually don't know what our young people know. We don't know what they don't know or how we compare internationally. We don't have the data to say we have a problem, let's fix it. We've lost our national voice in a global conversation we used to help lead. That was a choice, but it can be reversed. So now, none of this means education doesn't matter. It does enormously. And actually, we consider it to be a fundamental right. If we live in a financialised society, we have a right to know how to navigate it, especially as these forces change how we use money. But we have to be honest about how we're doing it. For too long, we've treated financial education as a nice to have, a lesson in school, a pamphlet, a workshop, and assumed the job was done. But financial capability isn't acquired through a single lesson in time. It's built across a lifetime, and it changes as our lives change and when our systems change. The research confirms that there is certainly a decay effect in financial education, no matter what its form. Continual exposure is necessary. So the decisions a 20-year-old faces, like a growing HECS debt, first attempt investing, moving out of home, are very different to those for someone who's approaching retirement. They're trying to navigate superannuation, if they're lucky enough to have it, and working out how long their money's going to last, and whether it can pay for healthcare, aged care, and changes to their living arrangements. So there's an uncomfortable realisation at both ends of that life course. So in the home, many parents don't feel confident in introducing money lessons to their children or helping their young people with decisions about crypto and new investment platforms. These are changes and these are innovations that have come after they have formed their habits and their money habits as well. So they don't feel comfortable helping their young people. They need education as well in these areas. In schools, which actually is our most equitable way to reach every child, almost no one can tell you what's actually being taught or what the outcomes are. And meanwhile, young people are starting out are getting their financial information from TikTok. As many of our interviewees raised, the rise of online financial advice through finfluencers has increased the access to financial information, but how much of it is misinformation? Only 9% of Gen Z feel satisfied with what they know about money. So they're yearning to learn more, and they want information about how to make the most of their money. Many have given up on home ownership, although now the government's already fixed that, and have become actively interested in other strategies, and some of them are really quite high risk. And it's not only the young. Midlife, pre-retirement and older people face a different set of financial decisions and life events, and they're susceptible to scams that are tailored specifically for their situations. The most prominent scams in Australia at the moment are investment scams, and they hit hardest in the middle and later years when people have superannuation savings to lose, but they don't have the time left to rectify any losses. So whose job is it to fix it? The answer is all of ours. Financial education's a shared responsibility. It's across the home, school, workplaces, community organisations, the financial sector and government. So no single setting can do it alone, and it has to be the right kind of information. It has to be relevant, ongoing, trustworthy and accessible. But right now, no one is coordinating any of that, which is exactly why leadership matters. So what do we need? So in essence, we need a response that is more coordinated, more integrated, more sustained, not another campaign telling people to try harder. We need a response that works on the conditions. So initially there's two steps: reinstate an agency and that can lead and coordinate policy, practice, research, regulation and education right across government. Second, we need to create a national financial wellbeing strategy based on the principles of a wellbeing economy, one that connects financial wellbeing to health, to technology and climate, and to the other systems that shape our lives across the whole life course. But here's the encouraging part: we don't have to invent the scaffolding. Australia already has Measuring What Matters, our national framework for healthy, secure, sustainable, cohesive and a prosperous society. Financial wellbeing sits within each of those words. The structure exists, and what's missing is the mandate to use it. So let me leave you with this. Australia has the evidence, we have a framework that fits, and we have the goodwill across the sectors to act. So what's missing is the mandate. 25 years ago, we asked individuals to do better. The next 25 should be about all of us: government, regulators, industry, community, and research, building a system in which financial wellbeing is within reach for all Australians. Thank you. I think I'm ahead of time.
Thanks so much, Ros. That's incredible. You've managed to cover such a huge amount of ground in such a short time. And the report is not short, and that's for a reason. There were a lot of topics to cover. And I encourage everyone on the webinar today to read the executive summary and then deep dive into the range of topics that are of interest to you. I appreciate in a 45-minute webinar we can't cover them all the issues in there. But what surprised you most in undertaking this research? Obviously, it was complex. It took quite a lot of time. You had an amazing advisory group, reference group, and you conducted quite a number of interviews for the extensive case studies in the research. But is there something that really stood out to you in the process?
Yes, look, constantly I was surprised at the impact of some of these systems, and I think I was mostly surprised I mean, I knew the systems were impacting our finances, but I think it was the integration of those systems and the compounding effect. That was a little bit surprising. I think originally I was thinking, oh, I can do three or four standalone pieces, and but they were so integrated that they had to be dealt with together. The other surprising thing that I found was how the actual causal effect of childhood poverty and childhood events, and how that has an impact on financial wellbeing across the lifetime. So it's almost like we've always started almost at adult level, or even young people at best, but childhood is where the interventions need to start. And it's just a losing battle if we don't start earlier. And it is causal; it's not a correlational effect. So that was really quite confronting to learn that. And the other surprising thing was, and you'll have to look in the big report about this, was the extent of the gambling ecosystem that technology has fueled. And that shocked me as to how talk about creating partnerships. I mean, we could only wish for the partnerships that they have already created with the gaming companies and the gambling companies and sport. So again, it's that they actually call it an ecosystem now. So it's more than just a sector; it's an ecosystem, and I think that it's got a weigh on us now, and it's going to be even harder to try and rein it in. The longer it's taken to get the small little adaptations that we needed to, about the ads now. I mean, that's just not going to do it. So that was really, again, confronting. So there were a number of few little topics there that I was really surprised at.
I think when you talk about all the little topics, it really is how do they impact on each other, and it's those intersections that really make the whole system complex. One of the things that we were really interested in reading about, and it is a thread through around the impact of financial outcomes and financial well-being on physical, mental, psychosocial, and community health. Is there an example, particularly from the health domain or sphere, that you think really encapsulates the issues or the intersection between financial health and physical health?
Yes, there's a topic on financial toxicity, which again was new to me because I don't come from the public health sector. It's quite a commonly used term there, but that in itself is explicitly talking about how physical health affects the mental health and the financial as well. So it's even in a country where we have free medical services and health, and it comes from originally from cancer areas and oncology, but that is a really big issue, and it's bigger than what we think because we think it's all free, and it isn't, and it's of course women are usually worse off in those situations. So financial toxicity is something that's very applicable to this area. The public health people have noticed it. So they're talking about the influence on finances by people having to take time off work, the cost of medications and treatment. People are going without because they can't afford it. So therefore, that affects the physical health. So it's like a positive feedback loop that and unless, again, early intervention is the only way we can help. And there is ways of integration of financial help or financial advice or counselling, let's say advice, at particular times with the health, like having them in the same place or having that each cognizant of each other is one area where we could do that. And that's one of the recommendations from the research, is to integrate health and financial services more closely.
Thanks, Ros. That's a really important theme, looking at those wraparound supports to help people experiencing particular life events or at a particular stage in life where they need the assistance. And on the face of it, it can look like one issue, but once you dig down, there's multiple issues there. I think one of the other themes that's really struck people and once you get thinking about it is the environmental piece and the impact of climate change, and particularly around cost of insurance. Do you have any further observations that you would make about that topic and area? Because it is incredibly complex, but it is an area that impacts so many of us.
It is, and I think to me the disheartening revelation from the research was how it affected young people. And so the insurance and living without a home while the insurance people sorted it all out, it's taking years. People up north in northern New South Wales are still living in temporary housing. And so there was a report that we included and referenced about how this affects young people and their education and their learning and their sporting, all the things that make up financial well-being. we don't think about the young people and their effects, and also the mental health, where young kids are triggered so easily now if they smell smoke because of the bushfires. And so I think it is about, thinking broader and how it's affecting the life course. People from every bracket are being affected. Older people, and climate change means that, if they can't heat or cool their housing, they're choosing between that and food and medicine. So no matter where you want to sort of throw the dart at, there will be impacts that I think require a closer look, rather than just looking at it as one element. But the insurance issue, and Julia from the Financial Rights Legal Centre, I mean, the experts are sort of struggling with it, so it's not an easy fix. And but there are some things that can be done, now, but then some will take longer, of course.
Yeah, thanks, Roslyn. I think that also comes back to the central theme, and we mentioned it in Melbourne, is you can't educate your way out of poor system design and financial barriers. And I think insurance is one of those areas. Even those with the highest levels of financial literacy will struggle to make sense of very complex insurance policies. And as we've moved to more frictionless interaction with products and services, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have the information that we need to make those decisions. Turning to a couple of the questions that have been posted by the audience, and although they're different, they're on similar themes. So thank you, Diane and Kelly. Diane mentions about schools being an equitable method to start the financial wellbeing journey and education. So Diane makes the point that for those that are perhaps not in mainstream schooling or are homeschooled, how do the different schooling systems intersect, and how can we encourage financial education for all? And Kelly makes the point about you map through life stages, and that's been a hallmark of your work for many years, Ros, is looking at what people need at particular stages in life. But what about where you teach kids financial literacy in schools, a workshop, and then they go on to leave school, and they have to make really important life decisions early on about study, work, living arrangements, going into debt, saving, travel, whatever that might be, that might then mean that they end up struggling in the workplace. So how important to you is it about starting early and reinforcing financial education at those key points of life?
Well, it's critical, and I think that's one of the major themes throughout. I mean, it does need to start in the home, but unfortunately now the home is less equipped than it might have been even 10 years ago, because, I mean, I must admit, I don't think I could teach crypto to anybody. And then it is about those the stages. Workplaces have to be involved, and overseas they are more involved. The OECD have a particular guideline or manual on how to do it in the workplace. So there's information out there, but it needs that coordination again. So, and coordination, which might say, it doesn't matter what school you're in, and it doesn't matter, but these are the things you have to learn by the time you've finished. And I mean, we might criticize the states a lot, and rightly so at the moment, but there's, 35 or more states where it's mandatory for kids. They can't finish or graduate from high school until they've done some sort of personal finance course at school. So it's that sort of accountability and guarantee, I guess. I mean, there's always going to be people that slip through the gaps, I guess, but it makes it at least it lessens the chance of people having no financial education by the time they leave school. But then it has to be accessible. So for those who aren't in school, yes, the home should be well equipped, but if that's not the case, I mean, where can they go? And I think if all those sectors that we mentioned have their role to play, then it should be at least easier for young people to, or anybody, to find access to what they need to know when they need to know it, and they need it to be trustworthy. So that's the other issue. The technology has made it accessible. Never has there ever been such accessible financial information, but we don't know if it's true or not. We don't know if it's misinformation or if it's good information. And by the sounds of what, I interviewed Rosette, who knows a lot more about this than me, if we've got kids asking at school how to set up a drop shipping company, or how to evade tax, or how to, invest in crypto, then I think that's sort of a signal. So they're wanting to know, but they're just getting their information from, dodgy areas, dodgy people.
Yeah. And that is borne out by the results of our teacher, student, and parent surveys, that students are still starting in the home, but where people may not necessarily have the confidence to have that conversation or don't have the knowledge, they're turning increasingly to social media, and the results of the recent ASIC Young People Survey pointed to that as well. Do you find it reassuring, however, that young people are still interested in those basics of tax, super, spending, saving?
Yes, very much so. Look, it was really interesting to hear that, and that's a really good sign. So they're searching and they're yearning for information because they want to make the most of their money. And like I said, I mean, whether the housing problem has been solved already or not, they do want to make the most of whatever, if they're earning a little or if they're earning a lot, they want to make the most of their money. So there is that interest there, which is a really great start. So
fantastic. Thanks to everyone that's popped comments or questions in the chat channel. Jenny Rolfe Wallace is well known to us. So Jenny, thanks for your point. It talks about Deacon's Changemaker research, which is a whole nother area. Perhaps if I can take a wider lens on that. Coming back to that old chestnut of financial literacy really is about, maths. I think we can all accept that, financial education is much more than maths and business studies, and it is embedded throughout the curriculum. Jenny's asking, and I appreciate you're not a school education expert, what's the strategy for building the capability of teachers in schools to respond to the needs of students rather than always just having external programs?
Well, there isn't a formal strategy, but the change makers that Carly Swartsky and Deakin have led is fantastic. It wasn't quite finished when I interviewed Carly, but that's the sort of thing that is inspiring teachers, and that's what needs to be scaled. So it does need to start. And I had a PhD student that looked at pre-service teachers and looked at their financial capabilities and did the measure as that. And yes, they're low. They were low levels, but they're wanting to know more. So they do want the support. And you can say, if you're not comfortable in teaching something, and if you have a choice of not teaching it or running out of time, then that's the pathway you're going to take. So and there is that question of embedded, not embedded. And I think that by focusing on that question, we're sort of missing the point a little bit. So I think we need to take a step back and actually find out what's happening. And that's where the measurement comes in, and what we need to know comes in first before we start making those jumping to those decisions straight away without knowing what's going on. So we need to measure what's happening, but it does have to start with pre-service teachers. That's where it does need to start, and it needs to be accountable and not just something that will attract a few people who are really, there's champions in every area, which are great, and that's what we need, but we need everyone to be a champion at school because that's where the kids are.
Yeah. So, thanks, Ros. And thank you for your very in-depth response to what is a complex issue that I think people emotionally feel attached to starting financial education in schools, but we also need to acknowledge the fantastic work that teachers and educators are already doing, and the resources and support that we need to be providing to schools in order to translate that and support students of all different backgrounds and stages of life. We've covered lots of ground in our 40 minutes to date, and I'm aware that there are questions and comments pushing on through there. As we think about wrapping up the webinar, there's various comments around the difficulty relating to accessing financial counselling and some of the barriers that are in place for people that want to actually complete financial counselling. We know that there is a shortage of specialist financial counsellors in various areas, and Ecstra, as part of our grant making work, does work quite closely within an ecosystem that includes community organisations, financial counsellors, community legal centres. So we don't underestimate how challenging that is. But Ros, turning back to your point about getting that ecosystem to work together, obviously there's the community sector. Financial services are a really important stakeholder group because, you know, they hold people's money and money makes the system work. How important do you think it is to get people together to discuss these issues? Yes, the measure of what matters framework is really important, but what's the collaboration that you think needs to happen in order to move on some of the recommendations and suggestions that you've made in your report?
It's the only way that it can happen, and it does. The recommendations do include all sectors, and the financial sector have been in it. They've done the most out of any sector, really, and that's where it started, like 2003 or 2000. Like it was they did move on that, but and also the collaborations that started then. I remember thinking at the time, wow, you know, a bank sitting down with, you know, the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence, this is unusual. But so we know the partnerships are better formed now, and it does need to come. And also for this research, I mean, I'm a researcher, not a practical person, and yet, you know, it's the practical people that brought it to life. They're the ones that we can sense check the research against what's already happening there. So the people in the community organisations, they're the ones that are seeing it on the ground, and there is a delay in getting it into the research articles. So, so that's why, I mean, this report without them would have been not nearly as good, or not nearly as interesting. And it also shows us what can be done in when people are seeing a problem and they're doing something about it. So they're actually not even waiting for the rest of government to do it. They see a problem and they're dealing with it, and they're fixing it in their own community. So, but the problem with that, with everyone doing their own thing and not sharing, that's the issue, is that we don't know what's going on. I was surprised to see what was going on. And so therefore we do risk the duplication or the fragmentation, or so it makes more sense. And, you know, wasted money in this sector is just really, really bad. So if we do need collaboration in order for all of those things.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Ros. As I said, 45 minutes is a really tough ask, particularly for a researcher at heart, to wrap all those themes in. But I think that's probably a really good point at which to wrap up the webinar. Australia does have a financial wellbeing strategy, but it's currently dormant. It would be fair to say that Australia was a leader in this area and could be again. Regulators such as ASIC are doing a really fantastic job. But the OECD and international peers have a pretty good roadmap, and over 50 countries have national strategies. So one of the outcomes that we are hoping from people reading and reflecting on the themes in this report is to join a growing coalition of organisations, stakeholders,